The alert came at 09:14 and it was not an emergency. That is the first thing I want understood. I have sat this bridge for 23 years, and the alert that morning was a Category 2, a formal diplomatic notification, routed through the Boundary Accord's automated monitoring layer, informing me that a foreign government had declared transit intent toward the line. Category 2 means no weapon has been drawn, no vessel has crossed. Someone, somewhere, at a distance still measured in light years, has filed paperwork. I opened the Accord file. I always open it when a Category 2 comes through. Not because I need to read it again. I have read it more times than I have read anything else in my life, including the maintenance logs on this vessel's port-side sensor array, which is saying something. I open it because procedure requires me to confirm that paragraph 78 is still present, unrevised, and sealed. It always is. It has been for 911 years. Paragraph 78 is 7 sentences long. I have counted. I do not know anyone else who has counted, because I do not know anyone else who has read it. I do not mean that it is classified in the usual sense. It is not redacted. It is not restricted. It sits in the founding text of the Boundary Accord, the document every spacefaring government in this region ratified as a condition of recognition, and it is available, in full, in every language the Accord supports, to any delegate who requests it. No delegate has ever requested it. The Accord was drafted 913 years ago by a joint commission of 41 species and 1 human representative. The human representative's name was Marit Solen. She was 62 years old. She had been a border systems administrator for 31 years before the commission convened, and she spoke, by the accounts I have found, very little during the 11 months of negotiation. The other 41 delegations drafted 77 paragraphs governing transit rights, buffer designations, signal protocols, emergency arbitration, and the formal definition of hostile intent. Marit Solen drafted one. It was introduced on the last day of the session. She read it aloud. No delegate asked a question. No delegate requested a revision. No delegate voted against it. The paragraph was ratified by unanimous consent and sealed into the founding text. The session closed. Marit Solen returned to her post and served another 14 years before she retired. She never published a commentary on the Accord. She never gave a lecture. She never explained why she wrote paragraph 78 or what she expected it to do. She died at 89. In a house on a planet I have been to once, and her personal records, released 40 years after her death, contained no mention of the clause at all. The clause defines what human space is permitted to do in the event that a recognized government crosses the boundary line with verified hostile intent. That is all I will say about its content. I will say this: the paragraph does not describe a weapon. It does not name a fleet. It does not reference a technology or a capability or a tactical doctrine. It describes a condition. The 7 sentences define the condition under which the boundary ceases to be a boundary and becomes something else. The language is administrative. The grammar is clean. There is no rhetoric in it. Marit Solen wrote it the way she would have written a maintenance log, and I think that is the most important thing about it. In 911 years, 3 species have reached the preliminary trigger conditions for paragraph 78. The preliminary conditions are not themselves remarkable. They require only that a recognized government declare hostile transit intent and position a force within the penultimate buffer zone, the second buffer zone, still 2 zones out from the line itself, still a long way from crossing. When the preliminary conditions are met, the Accord's automated monitoring layer does one thing. It transmits a copy of paragraph 78, the full text, all 7 sentences, to the approaching species' home government. The transmission arrives in their own language. It carries no commentary, no warning, no additional context, just the paragraph, just the 7 sentences, just the administrative description of what the boundary becomes if they cross it. The first species to trigger the preliminary conditions was the Orvesan Mandate, 406 years ago. They had positioned a survey and escort formation of 19 vessels in the second buffer zone and filed a formal declaration of sovereign interest transit. Their stated objective was cartographic, a boundary survey with armed escort. Their formation carried no invasion-grade weaponry. Their commander filed the transit paperwork correctly and in triplicate. The automated transmission fired. The Orvesan formation withdrew 9 hours later, not gradually, not with a staged tactical retreat or a formal redeployment. They reversed heading on all 19 vessels simultaneously and returned to their home anchorage at maximum sustainable speed. The mandate's transit declaration was rescinded without a replacement filing. No official statement was issued. The mandate's diplomatic archives from that period were sealed for 200 years and, when they were opened, contained no reference to the withdrawal or to paragraph 78. The relevant file had been removed, not redacted, removed. The second species was the Thesic Combine, 219 years ago. 41 armed vessels, A formal incursion declaration backed by a legislative mandate from their governing quorum. They were the only species to reach the preliminary conditions with an actual legislative authorization for hostile crossing. The automated transmission fired. The quorum rescinded the authorization within 6 hours. Every member of the authorization committee resigned within the following month. The Combine's military liaison to the accord submitted a one-line amendment request asking that paragraph 78 be moved from the general text to a restricted annex. The request was denied, not by human space, but by the Combine's own diplomatic staff, who withdrew the request before it was formally logged. I do not know what conversation preceded that withdrawal. I do not think I need to. The third species was the Varenthi Sovereignty, 81 years ago. 11 vessels, a small force by any standard. They reached the preliminary conditions almost by accident, a border exercise that drifted past the buffer threshold during a calibration error. The automated transmission fired. The Varenthi force reversed heading within 40 minutes. The Sovereignty filed a formal apology to the Accord within the hour. Their border exercise protocols were revised the following week to include a mandatory standoff margin 3 times the width of the second buffer zone. Their military academy added paragraph 78 to its curriculum, not the text, which remains unread by their delegates to this day, but the fact of its existence and the instruction never to approach the conditions under which the transmission fires. That was 81 years ago. This morning at 0914, the Tesavrin Compact declared hostile transit intent toward the line and positioned a force of 34 vessels in the outer buffer zone. They have not yet reached the second zone. They have not yet triggered the preliminary conditions. They are still a long way from the line. I opened the Accord file. Paragraph 78 is present, unrevised, sealed, 7 sentences. The same 7 sentences Merit Solen read aloud to a room of 41 delegations 911 years ago, in the same administrative language, with the same clean grammar, describing the same condition. At 11:40, the Tesavrin formation crossed into the second buffer zone. The preliminary conditions were met. The automated transmission fired. A copy of paragraph 78, translated into Tesavrin Standard, was delivered to the Compact's governing council. At 12:03, the Tesavrin formation reversed heading. The transit declaration was rescinded. No official statement was issued. I closed the file. I noted the date in the bridge log. I did not add a commentary. Merit Solen never added a commentary either, and I have come to believe she understood something about paragraph 78 that is difficult to put into words, that the paragraph does not need to be explained, that it does not need to be discussed, that the 7 sentences, read once, in the quiet of a governing chamber by whoever opens the transmission, are sufficient, that no one who has read them has ever needed to read them twice. I do not know what the paragraph will do if it is ever invoked. I do not believe it will be invoked. I believe Merit Solen knew that when she wrote it. I believe she understood that the most effective clause in any accord is the one that never needs to be enforced, not because it is empty, but because the 7 sentences make enforcement unnecessary. The bridge is quiet. The sensor array hums at its post-alert baseline. The watch continues. The paragraph has not changed. In 911 years, 4 species have received it. 4 species have withdrawn. The line holds. The boundary remains a boundary. I will sit this bridge until they send someone to replace me. I expect that will be a long time. The watch is not difficult. The paragraph does the work. I do not think it will need to become anything else.